the show that knows that it knows nothing. Tonight is a litter of landmarks, learning and larceny. And joining me are the larksome David Mitchell, the laudable Colin Lane, the ladylike Joe Brand, and the live-in Alan Davis. So let's hear their buzzers. David goes. Oh, Colin goes. Very lucky. And Joe goes. And Alan goes. That's it. Well, if you've enjoyed QI, do tune in again next week. But don't forget that you have spend a penny cards. There is almost certainly going to be a question that is lavatorial. And if you spend a penny, when I ask the question, you get extra points.
What about if we actually want to go through the recording?
You should find a little bottle and funnel underneath. Anyway. Now, last question first. Actually, why don't you do some of the work for a change? You can talk about one of two things. One is, what about the death of the last American Civil War pensioner, or the last thing you'd like to see on the London Underground? Choose. Go.
The last thing I'd like to see on the Underground is a dying American Civil War.
Well, that would put it all into one, wouldn't it? You're right.
Just trying to make it easy.
A dying American Civil War, or a dying American Civil War pensioner?
No, a dying American Civil War pensioner.
Yeah. If you can give me a date as to when you will be able to see the last pensioner for
It was in the 1860s.
Well, it finished in 1865, didn't
Correct.
it?
You get your point for knowing the date of the end of the
do
Civil
I?
War. Yeah.
More than 100.
And a lady as well.
More than 100 years after that is unlikely. So I'm going 1962.
Well, that's not correct.
That's very... Because he'd have to have been a toddler during the American Civil War, and...
He might be 115.
Well, we're talking about pensioners, not veterans. The last veteran to die, amazingly, died in 1956, aged 109. There he is, Wilson, his name was.
And there's the toddler.
There was a great-great-great-great-grandchild, I'd imagine. A lot of them did live well into the 20th century because they were teenagers during the war, so he was the last veteran to die. But pensioners could have received a pension from the United States government because of their fathers. They would still get a pension.
So it might still be ongoing then.
Well, that's the answer. Still alive.
And here tonight.
It's only $876 a year, but it's still a pension. And the last widow of a Civil War soldier died in 2008.
Wow. The last widow of a soldier?
Yeah. In 1934, Maudie Hopkins married an 86-year-old veteran called William Cantrell, who had fought as a teenager.
How old was Maudie Hopkins?
Well, she was pretty old when she died, but...
No, when she got married.
Oh, she was young. Very young.
Really?
Yeah.
She was a toddler.
Alberta Martin died in 2004. She married aged 21 in 1927, an 81-year-old Confederate veteran who died in 1931. She then married his grandson. That's peculiar, isn't it, to marry the grandson of your husband?
How would you feel if you were the son, though?
Yeah,
you skipped a generation.
She was 21 and she married...
Yes, step-grandson.
I see.
It would be odd if she married her own grandson. Right. So pretty surprising that these things can be that close.
On a TV show once in England, I sat 2 spots away from Alan Davis.
That's a connection that you're going to boast about in years to come, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah. And he played with his pen for the whole programme.
Oh, dear. Yeah. So, that's the Civil War answer, the last pensioner still alive. What about now the London Underground? There was something that's pretty grisly, I imagine, if you're a decent person, wouldn't want to see, but which was seen by people who travelled on the Underground. It was the last of its kind to happen in Great Britain. And it's quite odd to imagine something relatively modern like an underground system overlapping with this.
Somebody not looking at their phone.
2,000 people turned up to watch this event, and many of them went by tube.
Oh, a public
hanging?
execution.
It was a public execution, the last ever public execution in Britain.
Well, let's say, you know, the most recent.
Yes.
We live in dark times.
We do. They may well return.
Yeah.
Well, this one was in Newgate, which is now the Old Bailey, essentially. The Old Bailey was built on the ruins. And the old cellars of Newgate are still there. And the walk that the dead man used to have to take through archways of diminishing size. And there'd be baying and crying outside, and then he'd go across and there'd be a little patch of blue sky, and then he'd ascend the steps, and then the rope would be straight around him. And he was a Fenian, an Irish nationalist. He was called Michael Barrett. Many people believed he was actually innocent. A bomb was placed outside Clerkenwell prison in order to blow a hole in it to free a Fenian prisoner. So it was probably a Fenian who did it, and presumably a gang. He was the only one arrested and hanged, but on very slender evidence.
But I think the fact of the matter is, you know, if hanging came back again, you get thousands of people going to watch it. It'd be like a
Oh, of course,
match,
if
wouldn't
it was open to the public.
Like, I don't think
go
it's going to
viral.
be that long before they have hanging on Big Brother.
Well, there you are. The death of the last American Civil War pensioner is unusual because it hasn't yet happened, at least at time of going to press. And the last thing you'd probably want to go and see on the London Underground was the last public hanging. Now we move on to L for larceny. Would you rather get an email from a Spanish prisoner or a Nigerian prince?
Well,
A Nigerian prince.
Why is that, please, pray?
What?
Why is that?
I have no reason. I'm using the 50-50 rule.
Oh, fair enough.
Yes.
Yeah, they're both pretty bad options, to be honest. I think
Yes. Can you
know-
trust a Nigerian prince?
Have you never had one of those emails?
No, actually I don't, no.
Well, of course, Australian internet connection is so slow, you probably don't even get emails. I certainly can't download movies or anything. I know, look, I mean, I love the country. It's not your fault. Listen,
he's
Colin,
only going over there because that's the only place he can get Wi-Fi.
it's not your fault.
I love the country, but I do love so much to hang shit on it. As much as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I had a letter from a Nigerian person and that said ring this number, and the number was in Spain, so what about that? And it went to a house where I no longer lived, addressed to the person who owned it before I owned it.
That's pretty good.
Saying, you have won 4 million euros or something like this.
Yeah.
Ring this number. So I rang the number and I said,
Why did you ring the number?
because, you know, what if it was true? And I said, the person is, I just wanted you to know that the person you've sent this to doesn't live here anymore. I don't know where he lives.
And how did they respond?
They said, oh, well, according to the terms of the win, the winnings can be passed on to the next owner of the house. I said, oh, well, that would be me. So this is beginning to sound like a scam. Then he said, in a really thick Nigerian accent, with feigned indignation, how dare I suggest such a thing? And I said, well, then send me 4 million euros forthwith. He said, well, I need your bank account details. So Sunny Jim, and that was the end of that.
Yeah. There's some people do actually string them along. They're called 419 baiters. You bait them by pretending that you're really interested, and you waste their time. And it's called 419. Does anyone know the reason why 419 is attached?
No?
It's because under the Penal Code of Nigeria, 419 covers that type of thing.
The Penal Code of Nigeria.
Now.
See, what I love about those scams is the enormous sums of money. You know, they don't just put, like, 6 grand, which most people, let's be honest, might be quite pleased
Yes.
but they put sort of $500,000 billion. So the thing is, like, you know, that really cuts... I'm just giving them some advice.
Yes.
Completely cuts down the number of people
Yeah.
who will believe something
Well,
like
unfortunately, they, like all con artists, prey on the most weak and the most vulnerable, and, of course, I suppose the most greedy. There's an old rule in conning, in grifting, is that you can never con someone who isn't greedy. You know, all the great cons
Can I just point out,
require
I
people
was
to
not
want
conned.
money. No, you weren't conned. That's right. You
I was
weren't.
just curious
Yeah,
to
no,
see
no.
who this person
I
was.
wasn't
I
referring to
thought I
you.
might get some material
Yeah.
out of it.
But
The only way I could make it funny was by doing an appalling Nigerian accent, which is
and
apparently
that would be
racist.
inappropriate. This you must not do. That wasn't it, for example. No. The one thing that Nigerians do which is very pleasing is they put the stress in very odd places on English words. So I'm not in that category. They will say things like that, which I find very endearing. I hope that's not patronising, it's not meant to be. But they use deliberately.
Australia, Nigeria.
I'm patronising to everyone in equal measure, I assure you.
Excellent. That makes me feel so
What would you
good.
say? It's a scam.
So, nice one. They deliberately used spelling mistakes and bad grammar. Why would they do that?
To attract Australians.
Well, basically right. You've got it. We already know what Australians are like at losing things, so we've known 3 times before.
What's the most recent result?
The most recently, 3 out of 4 we'll take.
Yes,
happily.
yes.
But the reason, sadly, that they tend to use deliberately bad grammar and spelling is to get rid of people who will spot it and think, oh, this is not real. It's obviously not from a lawyer. But people who are more vulnerable, less educated, are more likely to fall for it. So it is all the crueler and meaner for that reason. Like that word refund there, for example. It's really, really cruel, like all cons of that nature. Yeah, exactly.
Have you had the one where you get an email supposedly from a friend saying,
Yes.
oh, I'm stuck in Malta?
Very much so.
I always send money to
Because
that.
actually I got one from a friend of mine, and he really was in trouble, and I thought it was a scam, and he died. But, you know, you can't win them all. That's not true.
No. Now, the first part of the question was about the Spanish prisoner. Does that phrase mean anything to you? Does it ring a bell of any kind? No. Well, the Spanish prisoner principle was really the same thing. It was a letter going all the way back, you're going hundreds and hundreds of years, from someone who claimed to be imprisoned by the Spanish. Please send me money, I will pay you back 1,000-fold, and you can marry my beautiful daughter, and so on. It was a very early con trick. And in 1914, which was the year Nigeria was founded, the British ambassador to Spain wrote to the Nigerian colonial officers, warning them about the Spanish prisoner trick, saying it appears that perpetrators of this fraud are still endeavouring to victimise residents of the British colonies. The public in Nigeria should be warned to be upon their guard. So it's possible that Nigerian criminals got this from their British colonial officers, in fact. It's a very ancient one. Now, describe the aviation techniques of the concrete arrows.
Well, concrete can't really fly, Stephen, can they? Because it's very heavy.
Well, the jet isn't heavy.
Good point.
It needs a lot of thrust.
Well, then you can, so when you're in an aeroplane, you can hear that noise, which is them filling it with helium. Assuming that's what the noise is, and that's how it works. Yeah.
Yes,
We're just waiting for the cabin to fill with helium, and then we will float gently up and then across the sea.
Imagine the conversations you'd have in the plane if it was filled with helium.
It does stuff to your ears, so that's what you are hearing, but it sounds normal.
We look to you for all this information. We're very grateful for it. Well, naturally, of course, you are quite right in the sense that there have never been any flying vehicles built of concrete. But there have been concrete arrows that have a great deal to do with aviation. And we go back to the early days of aviation, in a country that was expanding perhaps more rapidly than any economy has ever expanded, and that was the place...
America.
The United States of America, yes. And there's a large landmass, and they had
Arrows to show the way across it?
Well, yes, they had...
Is that how big
this was
the
even
arrows
faster.
were?
No. Those would be huge. But
They
they
would
were
be huge.
They were big enough. They had 70-foot-long concrete arrows every 10 miles across the USA. And there's one that still exists. In 1933, they stopped the programme because radio advances and so on had meant they were unnecessary for navigation. But before that, they really needed to find a way that airplanes didn't have to dive down into towns to look and see where they were, which before
Ask
that...
the direction.
Yeah, basically.
Down along the high street.
Where am I? And what was common was that the towns would actually paint the name of the town on a large roof.
Is that what those big... You see roofs with T's written on
well,
it.
maybe.
Is that for pilots who fancy a scone? T's, but no airport nearby, sorry.
But there, yes, the arrows, straightforward, really simple, and it worked. Speaking of things visible from the air, can you imagine something that the French made visible from the air to try and win the First World War? Or at least to try not to be utterly crushed by the First World War?
Something for the German spotter planes to see?
Yes.
The fake weaponry or something like that?
A
Wooden
great
tanks or something?
big baguette.
It was a fake something.
Fake Eiffel Tower.
Well, and more.
Fake guillotine.
Fake Paris.
A fake Paris, Colin. Well done. Finally. Finally. Come on, Opie, come on. And now you've had the pleasure of a whole audience being patronising to you. Come on, Ozzy, come on. Yes, you're absolutely right. The French were very worried as bombing technology was improving towards the end of the war that Paris, their beloved Paris, was going to go up in smoke and all the wonderful buildings. So 15 miles to the north, on the stretch of the Seine, they built lots of buildings, including a Gare du Nord, and even moving lights to suggest the railway tracks and other such things. Unfortunately, it was never completed, because they only had the idea in 1918, and by November, of course, the war
Was it to
was
scale?
over. From the air, yes, I think it was.
Not like that London in Legoland.
No, not like that. Now, which military leader does this mighty Norfolk oak commemorate? Yes, Joe.
Nigel Farage.
Well.
very big oak.
No, it isn't mighty, is it?
So
it's not that old, in fact.
Yeah, it could be.
It's about 80 years old, not quite 80.
Not quite 80.
It was a
Kitchener.
sapling. It was a sapling 78 years ago.
So, it'd be too late for Kitchener.
Not Mosley.
You're in the right ballpark, but even more of a military leader.
Hitler.
Adolf, as you rightly say, hit, as you pointed out, Hitler. Yes,
It's a commemorative oak tree in Norfolk.
The fact is, everybody who won a gold medal in the 1936 Olympics in Berlin was presented with a sapling of an oak tree. And there was-
Our oak trees. You mean
they
they've got oak trees in Germany?
Yes, I'm afraid the German for oak is Eich, so Eichmann is Oakman.
Is it really?
Some of the oak trees are on the German side.
Yes, our word acorn and oak come
Stout,
from the Eich.
proud English. Well,
Yeah,
we're all
hearts of
going
oak.
about-
I know. Anyway, the Hitler Oaks, yeah. There are none left in Britain except the one in Norfolk, which is surviving, as you see.
You would assume that it's not going to really last that long once people watch this.
Well, no, they might go and kick it down. A lot of Americans didn't keep theirs for that reason. Jesse Owens actually did keep his. He won how many gold medals at the... Four, quite right. And one of his Hitler Oaks survives in his old training school in Cleveland, Ohio. Gave another to his mother. Some US athletes threw those away, as they say.
What a lovely present.
Well, it was handed out by the committee rather than Hitler himself, but they were, of course, associated so much with
I gave
his
my mum a
leadership.
pair of Saddam Hussein's pants.
Anyway, there you go. Congratulations to all those who did win. Now, let's see how good your history is. Who can you see here? Let's have a look. It was filmed in 1902. Who's the august gentleman in the beard?
Is
George V.
No, isn't it? It's Edward VII.
It looks exactly like Edward VII. On the other hand, it isn't.
It's not Edward VII.
No, I know, it looks so like...
Father Christmas.
And it took place in 1902, which was the year of Edward VII's coronation. You could have played a spend a penny bonus, but I'll let you get extra points if you can spot the lavatory attendant in this.
Is he going to the lavatory in the film?
It's the man sitting down in the throne. The man you thought was Edward VII is, in fact, a lavatory attendant.
He doesn't look so much like Edward VII.
No, that's because he's in profile now.
I see.
He did look a bit like him full on.
It's not HD either, is it?
No, it's not HD. It's the early days of cinema, and the early days of cinema were dominated by one nation more than any other, really, and they were...
France.
The French, yes, exactly, the French. And in 1902, a French filmmaker called Georges Méliès decided to film the coronation, but he wasn't allowed in Westminster Abbey as soon as they heard how loud the film camera was when it was being cranked. So they said, we will have none of that nonsense here. So he decided to restage it in France and in a studio. And he found this lavatory attendant who had a nice beard, who was the right size, big adipose deposit, tubby chap, in other words. And he basically went through all the, elements of the coronation as happened. And so it was the first filmed simulacrum of the coronation, but it wasn't the real thing. In fact, Edward was ill for the real day, so he was able then to go to England and film the carriages arriving and cut that into the footage. And so that was the only real part. The rest of it was made up. And
What was the catering like?
Probably wonderful if it was French, I should imagine. Yes. What else? Oh, yes, the film went more smoothly than the real thing. In the actual ceremony, the very elderly and almost blind Archbishop of Canterbury put the crown on backwards. He then couldn't
He
get
shouldn't
up.
put it on at all.
Laughing about.
Yeah.
He also had to kneel down to swear fealty to the king, and then he couldn't get up again. So the king had to help him up.
That's what royalty should be, a blind Archbishop of Canterbury and a great big fat king who keeps getting terrible constipation and being unable to turn up at his own coronation.
Exactly. But the film, you'll be pleased to know, was a huge success. Briefly made that lavatory attendant one of the most famous film stars in the world. 1902, there weren't many to compare him with, but he was huge.
He was one of the biggest film star of the world.
Yeah, exactly. The king saw it when it came out, and he enjoyed it hugely, apparently, according to a letter sent to us by Pauline Méliès, who was the great-great-granddaughter of the filmmaker. Thank you, Pauline, for sending us that.
Do you
Very
think
great.
Edward thought it was real? He looked at it and said, I think I've lost weight.
Possibly. So, in the film, The Coronation of Edward VII, the man on the throne is a lavatory attendant. Now it's time for a bit of general ignorance, so fingers on buzzers, please. Where is the Duchy of Cornwall? Yes.
Devon?
No, you're right. That's to say, more of it is in Devon than is in Cornwall.
It's mainly in Waitrose now. In terms of value, one packet of those biscuits will buy you a farmhouse.
Somebody from Australia, what's a duchy? Is it something that you'd pass to the left-hand side?
A duchy is just another word for a dukedom. One of the titles that was given to the Prince of Wales when he was invested as Prince of Wales in 1973 was the Duke of Cornwall, which is typical. There he was, getting invested.
That's the Cornish flag.
And that's the Cornish flag, and that's pretty much all that's to be said on that subject, I think, but you've got it right. Now, what does a cowboy call his rope?
A lasso.
No!
Does he call it a rope?
He does. You're on fire! Lassos and lariats and so on, if you use that word, it would be a dead giveaway that you are, you know, like Billy Crystal, a city slicker in the world of the Wild West. They weren't invented in the Wild West, of course. Obviously, they've been used before. Ancient Egyptians used them to capture antelopes and wild oxen. However, they didn't use horses, the ancient Egyptians. Look at that, they're catching a hippo with one. That's very impressive.
Hippos are nasty, aren't they?
Yeah, oh, gosh.
They're not. They kill lots of people, even though they're vegetarians.
Yeah, yeah, used by attacking boats and things like that. But NASA is planning to use a lasso to capture what, would you imagine?
Stuff in space that's flying around dangerously, a bit like in Gravity.
Well, it's not dangerous stuff. It's an asteroid. It plans to lasso an asteroid, would you believe, and drag it into orbit around
Why are
the
all
moon.
their ideas so ridiculous?
They can choose a small one. It's about 7 metres across, so it shouldn't be too difficult. A specific type which would break up harmlessly in the Earth's atmosphere in case it...
Send Sandra Bullock to do it.
What country is that there?
Yes, look at it.
Hi.
It's about to be obliterated.
Last question. Which company makes the most tyres in the world?
Goodyear.
I had a very good year. Thank you. No, not Goodyear.
Harry Hill used to do that. They used to play Bet Lynch in... played, what's the character?
Julie,
Goodyear.
What's
her name? Yeah, not bad, thanks.
It's like the... who's that Austrian racing driver? Nicky
Lauda.
Who is that Australian?
Did you know that actress was stabbed? It's a sad story. That actress was stabbed. She was in Legally Blonde. Reese.
With a spoon?
No, with a knife.
Oh. Who's that actress who was in Friends? Courtney... What's her name?
Cox.
Courtney Cox. No, not lately. Who's supposed to say?
Go.
Silly.
Sorry, a good one to finish on, though.
Yeah, very good one. So who makes the most tyres in the world? It's not Goodyear.
A major tyre manufacturer.
Dunlop.
Yes, it's not Dunlop.
Hancock. No, Firestone.
Firestone? No, not Firestone. Yes, you'll get...
Pirelli?
Not Pirelli, no.
Continental.
Oh, audience
Lego.
gets the answer. It's Lego.
Lego, very good.
Very good, aren't they?
It sort of depends how you define a tyre, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
They're not pneumatic, it must be said. But
Yeah.
then tyres, pneumatic tyres,
they're
there
not
were
that
tyres
safe.
before pneumatic tyres. Well, there you are, on that interesting Lego note. That's all for tonight, leaving only the little matter of the scores. How interesting they are. I'm afraid to say, in a rather convincing last place, with minus 48, it's David Mitchell. And a full 30 points ahead with minus 18, Joe Brand. Most impressively skating on nul point, Alan Davis. Say what you like about them. Every cliche proven. Bad winners, graceless, but unquestionably nearly always victorious. Our winner, Colin Lane. Yes. 2 points. So it's good night from Colin, David, Joe, Alan and me, and I leave you with the last words of British politician Henry Fox. If Mr. Selwyn calls again, show him up. If I am alive, I shall be delighted to see him. If I am dead, he would be delighted to see me. Good night.
You can join Clarkson, Hammond and May as they preview the new series of Top Gear in front of a studio audience, and fans from around the world can watch on BBC iPlayer now. Join David Attenborough, Gary Lineker and McBusted on The Graham Norton Show over on BBC One in 5 minutes. And here on BBC Two next, it's Newsnight.